This lesson is going to talk about how to write equations in slope-intercept form. Our essential question, how do we write equations in slope-intercept form from tables, graphs, and points? In the video, we're mainly going to focus on what to do when we have points, and then we're going to translate that together into what we do when we look at a table and what do we do when we look at a graph. So if you please take a minute and make sure your notes are set up. The foldable that you have today, you should cut out into a triangle, and then you can fold the pieces in once we have taken all of our notes. So you may want to just leave it open for now. You probably don't have room to glue it down as a big triangle, so you are going to want to fold it. Okay, so the first thing that I want us to look at, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit, says to write equations in slope-intercept form, we must know two things. We must know, number one, the slope. We must know, number one, the slope, and we must know the y-intercept. I mean, obviously, if we're going to write it in slope-intercept form, we have to know the slope, we have to know the y-intercept. We should know that y equals mx plus b is slope-intercept form, but I'm going to review it real quick. M, remember, is the slope. B is the y-intercept. And really important, maybe something we haven't talked about, is that x and y, I think we have talked about it, but x and y represent any point on the graph. And I kind of got out of my space there. So you write it where you think you need to write it. X and Y represent any point on the graph or in our table. And so just a real quick example, if I tell you that the slope is 1/2 and I tell you that the y-intercept is 2, then we very easily can write an equation, y equals 1/2 x plus 2. There's our equation in slope-intercept form. We've already been doing a lot of that in class, so that should be familiar. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to look at this top triangle where it says write an equation in slope-intercept form when you're given the slope and a point, and it could be any point that's associated with this data. So let's say that I tell you the slope is -3/4, and I tell you that the graph of our equation passes through the point 8, -4. So again, remember, in order to write the equation, we have to know the slope and we have to know the y-intercept. Well, we know the slope, but we don't know the y-intercept. And so what we're going to do is we're going to solve for the y-intercept using our given information. So we have a point. Remember, I told you that x and y represent any point on the line. So I can take this point and I can plug it in for x and y. The -4 is our y, the x is our 8. So I'm going to put -4 in place of the y. M, I told you the slope was -3/4, so instead of M, I'm going to write -3/4. And then I told you, or from our point, we know that the x value is 8. So all we did is replace the variables we knew in our equation. And see, now we're going to solve our equation for our b, or y-intercept. So this would be -4 equals -6 plus b. Add 6 to both sides, and we get that our b is equal to 2. Now we're not done because we haven't written our final equation. Our final equation would be y equals -3/4 x plus 2. Our final equation should have the variables x and y in it because this is an equation that describes a particular graph or table. And it, okay? let's look at the example here. This time, we're going to write an equation in slope-intercept form when we're given 2 points. So this gets a little more complicated. Our points would be 1, 4, and 2, 7. These are just the points that I'm giving to you. So we know that the graph of this equation passes through these 2 points. And so if I know that, then I can write an equation of the line. Remember, the first thing we need to know is the slope. And so I'm going to start by finding the slope. So I'm going to do y minus y over x minus x, which gives me 3 over 1, or simply 3. So our slope is 3. If we don't know our slope, that is the first thing we have to find. Now I'm going to take our equation, y equals mx plus b, and just like we did in our top triangle, I'm going to plug in the slope, and I'm going to plug in one of the points to solve for b. Now it doesn't matter which point we use. We could use either point, and we would get the same result. I'm going to use the points 1 and 4 just because their numbers are a tiny bit smaller. Notice my y value is 4. We already decided that our slope was 3, and my x value is 1. So all we did is replace the variables with what we knew. Well, we know 3 times 1 is 3. So now I'm going to subtract 3, and we get that our y-intercept is 1. So now we're ready to write our final equation. Y equals 3, because that was our slope, x plus 1. Okay? What I would like you to do in the next triangle is try to practice a little bit on your own. So I'm going to give you 2 problems. Number 1, I'm going to tell you that the slope is -5 and our line passes through the point -4, 7. And I want to see what you can do with that. Can you use your above notes and write an equation in slope-intercept form? And then number 2, I'm going to give you 2 points. Can you find the slope? Can you find the y-intercept? And write the equation. And be ready to talk about both of these problems when you come to class. Please do not forget to take your Check for Understanding quiz about your video before you finish your work for the night.